In the heart of America's dairyland, where endless fields of corn give way to dense hardwood forests and winding country roads cut through the darkness like veins through living tissue, there exists a stretch of rural pavement that has become synonymous with terror. Bray Road is an unremarkable two-lane route in Elkhorn, Wisconsin, barely 3 miles long, connecting scattered farmhouses and marking the boundary between civilization and wilderness. By day, it serves as a quiet passage for local residents and farm equipment. By night, according to those who have traveled it and lived to tell the tale, it transforms into something else entirely. A hunting ground for a creature that should not exist. The first thing witnesses remember is the eyes. Not the amber glow of a deer caught in headlights, nor the green reflection of a dog or coyote, but something larger, more intelligent, more hungry. They describe eyes that hold a predatory awareness, a calculating intelligence that recognizes them not as observers but as prey. The second thing they remember, if they are close enough to see it, is the size. This is not an animal that could be mistaken for a large dog, despite what rational minds might hope. The creature stands upright like a man, towering between 6 and 7 feet tall, its body covered in dark matted fur that seems to absorb the moonlight rather than reflect it. Its shoulders are impossibly broad, suggesting strength beyond human comprehension. The third detail, the one that separates this from any known animal and plants it firmly in the realm of nightmare, is the face. Witnesses report a canine snout filled with teeth too large and too numerous, but set in a skull structure that suggests something more than simple beast. The expression these faces wear, according to those who have seen them, is one of awareness and malice. This creature knows what it is doing. It understands the fear it creates. And most terrifying of all, it seems to enjoy the hunt. This is not a bear wandering too close to human habitation. This is not a wolf pack defending territory. This is something else, something that walks the line between man and monster, between the natural world and the supernatural. For over 3 decades, the Beast of Bray Road has haunted southeastern Wisconsin, accumulating dozens of sightings, multiple investigations, and a reputation that has spread far beyond the borders of Walworth County. It has been featured in national documentaries, inspired books and films, and drawn cryptozoologists and monster hunters from across the continent. The story has all the elements of classic folklore transferred to modern America, complete with isolated rural setting, terrified witnesses, and a creature that defies all attempts at rational explanation. But unlike the legends of old, passed down through generations until fact and fiction become impossible to separate, the Beast of Bray Road emerges from documented police reports, newspaper archives, and recorded testimony from witnesses who stake their reputations on the truth of what they saw. To understand the Beast of Bray Road, we must first acknowledge that Wisconsin's monster did not appear in a vacuum. The archetype it embodies, the man-beast hybrid that hunts under the full moon, is one of humanity's oldest and most persistent nightmares. The werewolf, or lycanthrope, has stalked human imagination since the dawn of civilization, appearing in the mythology of cultures separated by thousands of miles and centuries of time. The ancient Greeks told of King Lycaon, transformed into a wolf by Zeus as punishment for serving the god human flesh. The Norse sagas spoke of berserkers and Ulfhedna, warriors who wore wolf pelts and fought with supernatural ferocity, their humanity subsumed by animal rage during battle. Medieval Europe was particularly obsessed with werewolves, seeing them not as mythological curiosities but as genuine threats requiring ecclesiastical and legal intervention. Between the 15th and 18th centuries, tens of thousands of individuals were tried and executed for the crime of lycanthropy across France, Germany, and Eastern Europe. The most famous case, that of Peter Stump in 16th century Germany, involved accusations of murder, cannibalism, and consorting with the devil, all supposedly accomplished while in wolf form. The trial records describe Stump as using a magical belt, given to him by Satan himself, that allowed him to transform into a ravenous wolf at will. His confession, extracted under torture, claimed he had killed and consumed 14 children and 2 pregnant women over a span of 25 years. These historical cases reveal something crucial about the werewolf myth. Unlike vampires, which folklore often depicted as reanimated corpses or supernatural entities, werewolves occupied a more ambiguous space in the popular imagination. They were humans who became monsters, ordinary people who harbored an extraordinary curse. The transformation could be hereditary, passed down through cursed bloodlines, or it could be inflicted through bite or scratch from another lycanthrope. Some traditions held that the change required the full moon, while others suggested the afflicted could transform at will. This flexibility in the mythology meant that werewolf legends adapted readily to local contexts, incorporating regional fears and cultural anxieties while maintaining the core concept of the predatory man-beast. The Native American tribes of the Great Lakes region, including those who inhabited what would become Wisconsin long before European settlement, maintained their own traditions of shapeshifters and skinwalkers. The Ojibwe and Menominee people spoke of the Wendigo, a malevolent spirit associated with winter, starvation, and cannibalism that could possess humans and transform them into monsters with an insatiable hunger for human flesh. While not strictly a wolf creature, the Wendigo served a similar cultural function to the European werewolf, embodying the fear of losing one's humanity and becoming a predatory threat to one's own community. These indigenous legends suggest that the archetype of the human-animal hybrid predator emerged independently across cultures, pointing to something fundamental in the human psyche that needs such monsters to exist. When European settlers arrived in Wisconsin during the 19th century, they brought their werewolf legends with them, transplanting old-world fears into new-world forests. The dense woodlands of southeastern Wisconsin, home to genuine wolf populations that pose real threats to livestock and occasionally humans, provided fertile ground for these imported nightmares to take root. German and Scandinavian immigrants, whose ancestral homelands had particularly rich werewolf traditions, found the Wisconsin wilderness both familiar and alien. The forests reminded them of home, but the scale was different, the shadows deeper, the sense of isolation more complete. In this environment, old stories found new life, whispered around farmhouse hearths on winter nights, blending with Native American legends to create a uniquely American monster mythology. The documented history of the Beast of Bray Road typically begins in 1989, when a wave of sightings brought the creature into public consciousness through newspaper coverage and official investigations. However, those who have studied the phenomenon in depth have uncovered earlier encounters that suggest the beast, or something very much like it, had been active in the area for decades before achieving widespread notoriety. The earliest confirmed report dates to 1936, when a night watchman named Mark Shackleman was making his rounds near St. Coletta Catholic Cemetery in Jefferson County, approximately 15 miles northeast of what would later become the creature's primary hunting grounds along Bray Road. What Shackleman witnessed on that November evening would haunt him for the rest of his life. According to his detailed account, given decades after the event, Shackleman was driving slowly along the cemetery road around midnight when his vehicle's headlights illuminated something extraordinary. A figure was crouched near a large mound of earth, digging with its hands, throwing dirt behind it like a dog. At first, Shackleman assumed he had encountered a grave robber or vandal, but as he brought his car to a stop and exited to investigate, the figure stood upright and turned to face him. What he saw froze him in place with terror. The creature was covered in dark brown or black fur, stood approximately 6 feet tall with a distinctly hunched posture, and possessed a face that Shackleman described as having features of both human and beast, though predominantly canine in appearance. The confrontation lasted only moments before the creature backed away into the shadows and vanished into the nearby woods. Shackleman, badly shaken, reported the incident to local authorities but was met with skepticism bordering on mockery. He learned quickly that sharing such an experience invited ridicule rather than investigation. This reaction would become a recurring theme in the Beast of Bray Road saga, as witnesses found that reporting what they had seen often brought social consequences that made silence seem preferable to honesty. For decades, Shackleman kept his story largely private, sharing it only with close family and friends who he trusted not to judge him insane or dishonest. It was only after the 1989 sightings made such encounters respectable, or at least discussable, that he felt comfortable providing a full account to researchers. The significance of the Shackleman encounter extends beyond simply establishing an earlier date for the beast's presence in the area. Several details from his account would prove remarkably consistent with later sightings, despite the witnesses having no contact with each other. The digging behavior he observed would be reported by multiple later witnesses, suggesting a specific behavioral pattern rather than random animal activity. The creature's posture, standing upright but maintaining a forward lean as if ready to drop to all fours at any moment, matches descriptions from the 1989 wave almost exactly. Most intriguingly, Shackleman claimed the creature made a sound he had never heard before or since, a three-syllable growling vocalization that he phonetically rendered as something like Gadara. This detail, unique to his account, adds a layer of strangeness that defies easy explanation. Between 1936 and 1989, scattered reports trickled in from various parts of southeastern Wisconsin, though most remained unreported to authorities or media. Local researchers collecting oral histories have documented several additional pre-year 1989 sightings, including a 1964 encounter near Holy Hill in Washington County and multiple incidents throughout the 1970s along rural routes in Jefferson, Racine, and Walworth counties. These accounts share common elements, describing a large, fur-covered bipedal creature with canine features, often observed along roadsides at night, sometimes apparently feeding on roadkill or other carrion. The pattern suggests not a single isolated creature or a series of hoaxes, but rather a persistent phenomenon occurring across a fairly wide geographic area over an extended time period. The question becomes not whether these encounters happened, as the number and consistency of reports make mass hallucination or coordinated fraud unlikely, but what these witnesses actually saw. The year 1989 marked a turning point in the Beast of Bray Road story, transforming it from scattered anecdotes and unreported encounters into a documented phenomenon that would capture national attention. The wave began in late October and continued through early 1990, with multiple witnesses reporting sightings along a specific stretch of rural road in Walworth County. Bray Road itself is an unassuming country lane running roughly north to south between Highway 11 and County Road O, passing through farmland and patches of wooded area. By day, it serves local farmers and residents without incident. By night, during that autumn and winter, it became the epicenter of one of America's most compelling modern cryptid cases. The concentration of sightings along this particular road, combined with the consistency of witness descriptions, set this case apart from typical cryptid encounters. The first widely reported incident of the 1989 wave involved a young woman named Doristine Gibson, who was driving along Bray Road late one evening in late October. Gibson, like many of the witnesses who would follow, was a local resident familiar with the area, someone who had driven these roads countless times without incident. As her vehicle traveled south along the dark country lane, something large and dark suddenly emerged from the roadside ditch and lunged toward her car. In the split second illuminated by her headlights, Gibson saw what she would later describe as a creature unlike anything in her experience. It moved on for legs, but with a gait that seemed wrong for any known animal. Too upright, too deliberate. The creature's body was covered in dark fur, and its face, glimpsed only briefly, appeared distinctly canine but with features that suggested something more than a simple wolf or dog. The creature's reaction to her vehicle added another layer of strangeness to the encounter. Rather than fleeing from the approaching car, as any normal animal would, the beast appeared to chase after it, keeping pace for several seconds before breaking off the pursuit and disappearing back into the darkness. Gibson, badly shaken, continued driving until she reached a well-lit area before stopping to compose herself. Like Shackleman decades before her, she faced a difficult decision. Should she report what she had seen and risk ridicule, or should she remain silent and wonder forever what had crossed her path that night? Unlike Shackleman, Gibson decided to come forward, filing a report with local law enforcement and sharing her story with others in the community. Her willingness to speak openly about the experience would prove crucial in encouraging other witnesses to step forward with their own encounters. Within weeks of Gibson's sighting, additional reports began accumulating. Laurie Endrizzi, a local resident, had an even more detailed encounter while driving along Bray Road on a late October evening. As she navigated a curve in the road, her headlights revealed something crouched on the shoulder, hunched over what appeared to be roadkill. Endrizzi slowed her vehicle, initially assuming she was observing a large dog or perhaps a bear, though bears were uncommon in the area. As her car drew closer, the creature turned its head to look directly at her, and Endrizzi found herself staring at something that defied all her expectations. The face was distinctly wolf-like, with a pronounced snout and pointed ears, but the eyes held an intelligence that seemed almost human. More significantly, the creature's front limbs, which Endrizzi could now see clearly in her headlights, were not simple paws but rather hand-like appendages with visible fingers or claws. What happened next would become one of the most detailed and chilling accounts in the entire Beast of Bray Road saga. As Endrizzi's vehicle passed, the creature did not flee or assume a defensive posture. Instead, it simply watched her, turning its massive head to follow her car with its gaze. Endrizzi described a profound sense of being evaluated, of being sized up by an intelligence that understood perfectly well what she was and what her vehicle represented. The creature's posture suggested it could rise to its hind legs at any moment, though it remained in a crouched position throughout the encounter. The entire observation lasted perhaps 5 to 7 seconds, but Endrizzi would remember every detail with crystal clarity for the rest of her life. She noted the creature's size, which she estimated at 5 to 6 feet tall if it stood upright, the texture of its fur, which appeared rough and somewhat mangy, and most memorably, the overwhelming sense of wrongness the sight produced in her mind. Russell Jest, a county employee, provided another significant sighting from the same period. Jest was driving along Bray Road in the early hours of the morning, returning home from a late shift when something large bounded across the road directly in front of his vehicle. The creature moved with tremendous speed, crossing from one side of the road to the other in what Jess described as 2 or 3 massive leaps. He caught only a glimpse of the animal, but what he saw was enough to convince him that he had not encountered any ordinary Wisconsin wildlife. The creature moved on its hind legs in a distinctly bipedal fashion, its body covered in grayish-brown fur, and its silhouette suggested something far larger than a deer or dog. Jest, like other witnesses, struggled to find adequate language to describe what he had seen, settling finally on the inadequate but evocative phrase, "It looked like a werewolf." The accumulation of sightings along Bray Road during late 1989 might have remained a local curiosity, whispered about among residents but never reaching broader awareness, if not for the involvement of a determined journalist who took the report seriously. Linda Godfrey, a reporter and artist working for the Week newspaper based in nearby Delavan, Wisconsin, first learned of the strange encounters through her editor, who had heard rumors circulating in the community about something unusual happening along the rural roads of Elkhorn. Initially approaching the story with healthy skepticism, Godfrey nevertheless recognized the potential for an interesting feature piece. She began reaching out to witnesses, conducting interviews, and attempting to piece together a coherent narrative from what seemed like an impossible collection of claims. What she discovered would change the trajectory of her career and establish the Beast of Bray Road as one of America's most credible cryptid cases. Godfrey's background as both a trained journalist and an artist proved invaluable in documenting the phenomenon. As she interviewed witnesses, she took careful note not just of their verbal accounts but also of their body language, emotional state, and consistency under questioning. She created detailed sketches based on witness descriptions, allowing them to correct and refine the images until they matched what the witnesses remembered seeing. This process revealed a remarkable consistency across accounts from witnesses who had no contact with each other and no knowledge of the other sightings. The creature they described, with minor variations in coloring and size estimates, was fundamentally the same entity observed along the same stretch of road over a period of weeks. Godfrey's artistic renderings, based on these interviews, would become the definitive visual representation of the beast, reproduced in countless books, documentaries, and websites. The witnesses Godfrey interviewed came from diverse backgrounds and had no apparent motivation to fabricate their accounts. Some were teenagers who might be dismissed as attention-seeking, but others were established members of the community with professional reputations to protect. They included county workers, local business owners, and lifelong residents who had never sought publicity and were visibly uncomfortable with the attention their reports generated. Many expressed regret at coming forward, having experienced mockery and skepticism from friends, family, and neighbors. Yet they all insisted, sometimes with tears of frustration, that they had seen something real, something that defied explanation, and that dismissing their testimony as fabrication or misidentification did them a profound injustice. Godfrey found their sincerity compelling and began to suspect that something genuinely unusual was happening along Bray Road, even if she could not yet explain what that something might be. Godfrey's articles about the Beast of Bray Road began appearing in the Week in early 1990, bringing the story to a wider audience. The response was immediate and intense. Some readers dismissed the accounts as nonsense or hoaxes, but others came forward with their own previously unreported encounters, not just from Bray Road but from throughout southeastern Wisconsin. The newspaper's office received calls and letters from people who had seen something similar years or even decades earlier but had never spoken publicly about it for fear of ridicule. This pattern, common in cryptozoological cases, suggests that the documented sightings represent only a fraction of the total encounters. For every person willing to report a strange sighting, particularly one involving a creature as fantastic as a werewolf, there are likely several others who choose silence over potential embarrassment. The media attention surrounding Godfrey's articles had several significant effects. First, it validated the experiences of the witnesses, giving them a public forum to share their stories without immediate dismissal. Second, it attracted additional scrutiny from both believers and skeptics, each group approaching the phenomenon with their own assumptions and agendas. Third, and perhaps most intriguingly, it appeared to correlate with a sharp decline in sightings along Bray Road itself. After the initial wave of encounters in late 1989 and early 1990, reports from that specific location dropped dramatically, leading some to speculate that the creature, if it existed, had moved on to less publicized hunting grounds. However, sightings continued to trickle in from other parts of Wisconsin, suggesting that whatever the witnesses had encountered was not confined to a single location. Every cryptid case inevitably attracts attempts at explanation, and the Beast of Bray Road is no exception. Skeptics and believers alike have proposed numerous theories to account for the sightings, ranging from mundane misidentifications to paranormal phenomena. Each explanation carries its own assumptions about the nature of reality, the reliability of human perception, and the possibility of unknown animals existing undiscovered in modern America. Examining these theories reveals as much about how we process the inexplicable as it does about the nature of the creature itself. The most prosaic explanations, while satisfying to some, struggle to account for the consistency and specificity of witness testimony. The more extraordinary explanations, while consistent with witness accounts, require accepting realities that challenge our understanding of biology and physics. The most common skeptical explanation dismisses the sightings as misidentifications of known animals, particularly bears. Black bears do inhabit Wisconsin, and when viewed from certain angles, particularly in poor lighting conditions, a bear rising on its hind legs could conceivably be mistaken for something more unusual. Proponents of this theory point to the fact that bears can stand upright, have powerful builds, and possess the size to match witness estimates. However, this explanation struggles with several key details. Multiple witnesses, including Laurie Endrizzi, who had an extended observation at close range, explicitly stated that what they saw was not a bear. Endrizzi, who viewed the creature from her car with headlights illuminating it, noted specific features, hand-like front limbs, a distinctly canine snout, and a body structure fundamentally different from the squat, hunched profile of a bear. Another skeptical approach suggests the witnesses observed large domestic dogs or wolf dog hybrids, perhaps exotic pets that escaped or were released by irresponsible owners. This theory has the advantage of explaining the canine features witnesses consistently describe while remaining within the bounds of known biology. Wolf dog hybrids, which are legal to own in Wisconsin under certain conditions, can grow to impressive sizes and might display behavior different from typical domestic dogs. Some exotic dog breeds, particularly those bred for protection or working purposes, can appear intimidating and unusual to observers unfamiliar with the breed. However, this explanation also faces significant challenges. No reports of missing large dogs or wolf dog hybrids emerged during the peak sighting period, despite extensive media coverage that would likely have prompted owners to come forward. More problematically, the bipedal locomotion witnessed by multiple observers does not match canine behavior. Some researchers have suggested that the Beast of Bray Road might represent an unknown species or a surviving population of a supposedly extinct animal. The dire wolf, a large canid species that went extinct approximately 10,000 years ago at the end of the Pleistocene epoch, is sometimes proposed as a candidate. Dire wolves were significantly larger than modern wolves, with more robust builds and more powerful jaws. If a relic population somehow survived in isolated areas, perhaps in the remote forests of Canada before migrating south, it could theoretically account for some aspects of the sightings. However, this theory requires several massive leaps. Dire wolves, while larger than modern wolves, were still quadrupedal animals that did not display the upright posture witnesses describe. Additionally, maintaining a breeding population of large predators in modern Wisconsin without extensive physical evidence, remains, scat, DNA evidence, seems virtually impossible. The paranormal explanation, which many find easiest to dismiss but which most closely matches the original werewolf mythology, suggests that the Beast of Bray Road is not a flesh and blood animal at all but rather a supernatural entity. This theory encompasses several variations, from the traditional werewolf, a human capable of transforming into a wolf-like form, to an interdimensional creature that appears in our reality under specific conditions. Proponents of this view point to several aspects of the sightings that resist conventional explanation. The creature's apparent appearance and disappearance without leaving clear trails or other evidence, its behavior that seems almost deliberate in confronting witnesses rather than avoiding them, and the concentration of sightings in specific locations that may hold some special significance. This approach, while intellectually unsatisfying to those who demand physical evidence, actually aligns most closely with the descriptions witnesses provide and the broader tradition of werewolf lore. The Beast of Bray Road phenomenon has had a lasting impact on the community of Elkhorn and the surrounding area, transforming a small Wisconsin town into an unlikely destination for cryptozoology enthusiasts and monster hunters. The response from the local community has been mixed, with some residents embracing the notoriety and others finding it an embarrassing distraction from normal life. Local businesses have capitalized on the legend, with restaurants featuring beast-themed menu items, gift shops selling creature merchandise, and tour companies offering nighttime expeditions along Bray Road. The annual Beast of Bray Road Festival, when it runs, attracts visitors from across the country, bringing tourist dollars but also reinforcing the town's association with a phenomenon many residents would prefer to forget. This commercialization of the cryptid has become a common pattern in communities associated with mysterious creatures. Linda Godfrey's continued investigation and documentation of the Beast of Bray Road extended far beyond her initial newspaper articles. She went on to write several books on the subject, beginning with The Beast of Bray Road in 2003, which compiled witness accounts, historical research, and her own analysis of the phenomenon. Her subsequent works expanded the scope of investigation to include similar creatures reported throughout North America, revealing that the Beast of Bray Road was not an isolated case but rather part of a broader pattern of upright canid sightings stretching from the Pacific Northwest to the eastern seaboard. Godfrey's research identified what she termed the American werewolf phenomenon, comprising hundreds of reported encounters with creatures matching the general description provided by Bray Road witnesses. The Beast of Bray Road has achieved a level of cultural penetration unusual for modern cryptids. It has been featured in numerous television documentaries, including appearances on shows such as Monster Quest, Paranormal Witness, and various programs on the Travel Channel and Animal Planet. These media appearances have introduced the story to millions of viewers worldwide, cementing its place in the contemporary cryptozoological canon alongside Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, and the Chupacabra. The creature has inspired films, including a low-budget horror movie released in 2005 that took creative liberties with the actual accounts, and countless YouTube videos analyzing witness testimony and proposing various theories. This media attention has both validated the witnesses who came forward and complicated the search for truth, as popular culture depictions sometimes overshadow the actual documented accounts. Within the cryptozoology community, the Beast of Bray Road is considered one of the more credible cases due to several factors. The multiple independent witnesses with consistent descriptions, the involvement of a credible journalist who documented the account systematically, and the existence of pre-year 1989 reports that could not have been influenced by media coverage all contribute to the case's reputation. The creature's behavior, as described by witnesses, displays patterns consistent across sightings, suggesting either a real animal with specific behavioral traits or a remarkably coordinated hoax maintained by witnesses who never met each other. The concentration of sightings in a specific geographic area over a defined time period, followed by their decline after media exposure, mirrors patterns seen in other cryptid cases and adds another layer of credibility to the phenomenon. The Beast of Bray Road cannot be properly understood in isolation. It exists as part of a larger tapestry of upright canid sightings reported throughout North America over the past century. The Michigan Dogman, the creature known as the Wolfman of Defiance County in Ohio, the Dogman of Kentucky, and numerous similar entities reported from Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois, and other Midwestern states all share core characteristics with the Beast of Bray Road. These creatures are consistently described as standing 6 to 7 feet tall on their hind legs, covered in fur that ranges from brown to gray to black, possessing wolf-like heads with intelligent eyes and displaying behavior that suggests both animal cunning and almost human-level awareness. The geographic distribution of these reports, concentrated particularly in the Great Lakes region but extending across much of North America, raises intriguing questions about whether we are dealing with a single widespread species or multiple localized phenomena. The Michigan Dogman legend provides a particularly interesting parallel case. Reports of a dog-headed creature walking upright in the forests of northern Michigan date back to the late 19th century, but the phenomenon achieved widespread attention following the release of a novelty song by radio DJ Steve Cook in 1987. Cook's song, The Legend, recounted allegedly true encounters with the Dogman, presented in a folk music style that gave the accounts an air of authenticity. The song became a regional hit, and soon the radio station was flooded with calls from listeners claiming their own encounters with the creature. As with Bray Road, the initial wave of media attention was followed by years of continued sporadic sightings and serious investigation by cryptozoologists. The similarities between the Michigan and Wisconsin cases, occurring in neighboring states and involving creatures with virtually identical descriptions, suggest either a shared cultural phenomenon or a population of unknown animals inhabiting the Great Lakes region. Native American traditions from the Great Lakes area contain accounts of creatures that bear striking resemblance to the modern reports. The Wendigo legend, while primarily associated with cannibalistic possession, sometimes includes descriptions of a physical creature that walks upright and displays both human and animal characteristics. The Ojibwe people spoke of the Mahingan, powerful wolf spirits that could take various forms and had complex relationships with humans, sometimes serving as protectors and other times as threats. The Menominee maintained stories of shapeshifters who could assume animal form, particularly wolves, to hunt or to carry out raids against enemies. These indigenous traditions suggest that the archetype of the upright canid has deep roots in the cultural history of the region, predating European settlement by centuries. Whether these stories represent actual encounters with unknown animals, cultural memories of extinct species, or purely mythological creations remains a matter of debate. The pattern of werewolf and dogman sightings in North America often correlates with cycles that some researchers have identified. Several investigators have noted that major waves of sightings seem to occur approximately every 10 years, with peak activity years like 1987, 1997, and 2007 showing elevated numbers of reports. The reason for this cyclical pattern, if it exists, remains unclear. Skeptics suggest it reflects media cycles and the influence of popular culture, with each generation discovering and reinventing the legend. Believers propose various theories, from breeding cycles of an unknown species to patterns in interdimensional doorways allowing creatures to enter our reality periodically. The 10-year cycle theory remains controversial even among cryptozoologists, as it relies on somewhat selective interpretation of sighting data and does not account for years with significant activity that fall outside the proposed pattern. One of the central challenges in evaluating cryptid cases is the persistent lack of physical evidence that would satisfy scientific standards. Despite hundreds of reported sightings of upright canids across North America over decades, no specimen has been captured or killed, no body has been recovered, and no incontrovertible photographic or video evidence has been obtained. This absence of physical proof is often cited by skeptics as the definitive argument against the existence of these creatures. If large predatory animals were roaming the forests and rural areas of Wisconsin and other states, they argue, we would expect to find remains, clear tracks, DNA evidence from hair or scat, or at minimum, high-quality photographs or video. The failure to produce such evidence after so many alleged encounters suggests the creature exists only in the misperceptions and imaginations of witnesses, however sincere those witnesses may be. The counter-argument from cryptozoologists and believers points to several factors that might explain the evidence gap. Large predators, they note, are notoriously difficult to track and observe even when we know they exist. Mountain lions, wolves, and bears can all live for years in relatively populated areas without most residents ever catching a glimpse of them. Security camera footage, game cameras, and casual photography have captured images of these known animals with increasing frequency, yet clear, unambiguous footage of cryptids remains elusive. This could suggest that unknown creatures are even more elusive than known predators, perhaps possessed of greater intelligence or wariness around humans. Alternatively, it could indicate that the sighting reports represent misidentifications of known animals under conditions that distort perception, poor lighting, unexpected encounters, psychological stress creating false memories of what was actually observed. Several pieces of potential physical evidence have been put forward in connection with the Beast of Bray Road and similar creatures, though none has proven definitive. Unusual track casts showing what appear to be canid-like prints from a bipedal creature have been collected from various locations, but these can be difficult to authenticate and are subject to multiple interpretations. Hair samples allegedly from unknown canids have been submitted for analysis, typically returning results indicating domestic dog, wolf, coyote, or sometimes degraded samples that cannot be conclusively identified. These ambiguous results could mean the samples are contaminated, that they come from known animals despite witness claims, or that testing is not sensitive enough to identify an unknown species closely related to known canids. DNA analysis, often portrayed as a silver bullet that will definitively solve cryptid cases, has its own limitations and uncertainties. The photographic record for the Beast of Bray Road is notably thin, consisting primarily of alleged distant or blurry images that could show almost anything. The few photographs and videos claim to show the creature suffer from the same problems that plague most cryptid imagery: poor resolution, distance, or angles that make definitive identification impossible. In the modern era of ubiquitous smartphones with high-quality cameras, the continued absence of clear cryptid photographs has become an even more significant problem for believers. Skeptics argue that if these creatures were real, the prevalence of cameras would have produced definitive evidence by now. Proponents counter that the very qualities that make cryptids cryptic, their rarity, wariness, and tendency to appear in remote locations or during nighttime hours, also make them difficult to photograph even in an age of constant documentation. The question of evidence remains perhaps the most fundamental challenge to accepting the reality of the Beast of Bray Road. Although the intense wave of sightings along Bray Road itself subsided after the initial media attention in 1989 and 1990, reports of similar creatures have continued throughout Wisconsin and neighboring states in the decades since. These ongoing encounters suggest that whatever phenomenon generated the original sightings has not disappeared but rather shifted or dispersed. Linda Godfrey's continued research has documented hundreds of additional reports, many of which never receive public attention because witnesses choose to share their experiences privately rather than face potential ridicule. The consistency of these descriptions across time and geography remains one of the most compelling aspects of the phenomenon, as witnesses who have no contact with each other and often no knowledge of previous reports provide accounts that align in fundamental details with the original Bray Road encounters. A notable concentration of sightings has been reported from the Kettle Moraine State Forest, a large protected wilderness area west of Milwaukee that encompasses over 30,000 acres of forest, wetlands, and glacial features. The forest's extensive trail system and relatively remote character make it attractive to hikers, campers, and outdoors enthusiasts, but some visitors have reported unsettling encounters with something that watches from the tree line or crosses trails in the twilight hours. These forest sightings differ somewhat from the roadside encounters that characterized the Bray Road incidents, with witnesses describing a more cautious creature that seems to observe humans from a distance rather than confronting them directly. Whether this represents a difference in individual animal behavior, a different creature altogether, or a shift in witness perception based on the setting remains unclear. The digital age has transformed how cryptid sightings are reported and investigated. Online forums, social media groups, and dedicated websites allow witnesses to share their experiences immediately and connect with others who have had similar encounters. This connectivity has both positive and negative effects on cryptid research. On the positive side, it allows for more comprehensive data collection and makes it easier for researchers to identify patterns and correlations in sighting reports. Witnesses who might once have remained silent now have low-risk ways to share their stories anonymously if they choose. On the negative side, the ease of online communication also facilitates hoaxes, allows witnesses to consciously or unconsciously coordinate their stories, and means that accounts can be contaminated by exposure to previous reports before a researcher has a chance to collect untainted testimony. Several recent sightings have attracted particular attention from researchers. In 2016, a hunter in northern Wisconsin reported a terrifying encounter with a large bipedal creature that approached his tree stand at dusk, seemingly unafraid despite the human presence. The witness, who carried a rifle, claimed he was too frightened to shoot, feeling that killing the creature would somehow be crossing a line he was not prepared to cross. His description of the beast's eyes, which he said seemed almost human in their depth of awareness, echoes accounts from witnesses decades earlier. In 2018, a motorist on a rural highway in Jefferson County, the same county where the 1936 Shackleman sighting occurred, reported a creature matching the beast description crossing the road at a full run on its hind legs, moving with a speed and fluidity that seemed impossible for any known animal. These recent accounts, occurring decades after the phenomenon first achieved public awareness, suggest ongoing activity that cannot be simply dismissed as copycat claims or cases of suggestibility. Understanding the Beast of Bray Road phenomenon requires grappling with fundamental questions about perception, memory, and belief. Human psychology, particularly regarding the processing of unexpected or frightening experiences, plays an undeniable role in any encounter with the seemingly impossible. When confronted with something that does not fit into our existing categories and expectations, our brains work rapidly to impose order and meaning, sometimes at the expense of accuracy. This does not mean witnesses are lying or that their experiences are not real to them. It means we must approach their accounts with both respect for their sincerity and awareness of how human perception works under stress. The interplay between objective reality and subjective experience becomes particularly complex when dealing with events that last only seconds and occur under less than ideal conditions. The phenomenon of pareidolia, the tendency to perceive meaningful patterns or images in random or ambiguous stimuli, certainly plays a role in some sightings. A bear glimpsed briefly in poor lighting, seen from an unusual angle, and filtered through the lens of regional folklore might be genuinely perceived as something more exotic. Confirmation bias, the tendency to interpret information in ways that confirm our pre-existing beliefs, can then reinforce that initial misperception. A witness who has heard stories of the Beast of Bray Road and then has an ambiguous encounter in the same area might unconsciously interpret what they see through the framework of those stories, adding details or embellishing memories to align with the expected narrative. This process need not be intentional or dishonest. Memory is reconstructive rather than reproductive, meaning we rebuild our memories each time we recall them rather than playing back a perfect recording. However, psychological factors cannot fully explain all aspects of the Beast of Bray Road case. Multiple witnesses, interviewed separately and immediately after their encounters, provided consistent descriptions before they had any opportunity for contamination or coordination. Some witnesses, like Laurie and Drizzy, had extended observations under good lighting conditions that should have revealed any mundane explanation. The specific behavioral patterns reported, the digging activity, the bipedal locomotion, the apparent intelligence in the creature's gaze, match across accounts in ways that random misidentification or hallucination would be unlikely to produce. The convergence of independent testimony becomes increasingly difficult to explain through purely psychological mechanisms as the number of witnesses grows. Either we are dealing with a remarkable series of coincidental misperceptions that happen to align, or something more substantial underlies at least some of the reports. The role of cultural context in shaping cryptid encounters is also worth examining. Wisconsin has a rich history of folklore and storytelling, and the region's German and Scandinavian heritage includes strong werewolf traditions. The Bray Road sightings occurred against a backdrop of this cultural memory, which may have influenced how witnesses interpreted and described what they saw. A large canid encountered unexpectedly at night could be perceived and remembered as more fantastical than it actually was, with the witness unconsciously embellishing details to match cultural expectations of what a monster should look like. This does not require conscious fabrication but rather reflects how culture provides templates and frameworks that shape our interpretation of ambiguous experiences. Every witness is embedded in a cultural context that influences perception, and ignoring that context means missing a crucial part of the story. At its core, the Beast of Bray Road phenomenon raises questions that extend beyond the simple matter of whether an unknown creature inhabits the forests of Wisconsin. It forces us to confront our relationship with mystery itself, with the unknown spaces that persist in our modern mapped and measured world. We live in an age that demands answers, that assumes every question has a knowable solution waiting to be discovered through sufficient application of scientific method and technological tools. The persistence of mysteries like the Beast of Bray Road in an era of satellites and DNA analysis represents a kind of affront to this assumption. It suggests that there are still things in the world that resist our attempts at explanation, spaces where certainty gives way to ambiguity and where conflicting truths might somehow coexist without resolution. The witnesses to the Beast of Bray Road had their lives changed by moments of encounter with something that should not exist. Whether what they saw was a flesh and blood animal, a psychological phenomenon, or something stranger altogether, the experience itself was undeniably real for them. The fear they felt, the shock of witnessing something impossible, the isolation of having an experience that others dismiss or mock, these are genuine human experiences that deserve acknowledgement regardless of what objectively happened on those dark roads. The Beast of Bray Road phenomenon is as much about human vulnerability and wonder as it is about unknown animals. It reveals our capacity for both extraordinary perception and extraordinary error, our hunger for encounters with the numinous, and our deep discomfort with uncertainty. The question of evidence, so central to how we evaluate cryptid claims, may itself rest on assumptions worth examining. We typically operate under what might be called an evidentiary hierarchy, with physical proof ranked as most valuable, followed by documentary evidence, eyewitness testimony, and finally anecdote and folklore. This hierarchy makes perfect sense within a scientific framework, but it can obscure other kinds of truth. The lived experiences of witnesses carry a reality that exists independently of whether we can produce a specimen or a clear photograph. The cultural impact of the Beast of Bray Road, the way it has shaped the community's identity and brought people together around a shared mystery, constitutes a different kind of truth than biological classification. Perhaps the most honest position is one that holds multiple possibilities in suspension, neither dismissing the witnesses nor uncritically accepting the most fantastic explanations. The Beast of Bray Road endures not because we have definitive proof of its existence, but because it occupies that fertile borderland between the known and the unknown. It inhabits the same space that werewolves have occupied in human imagination for millennia, serving as a reminder that the boundary between human and animal, between civilization and wilderness, between safety and danger, is thinner and more permeable than we like to believe. In the dark forests and lonely roads of Wisconsin, something walks that challenges our comfortable assumptions about the world. Whether that something is an unknown species, a supernatural entity, or simply the projection of our own fears and longings onto the mysterious night matters less than the fact that it continues to walk there, just beyond the reach of our headlights, waiting at the edge of certainty for the next traveler to glimpse its eyes reflected in the darkness. The Beast of Bray Road represents a profound and enduring mystery that has captivated researchers and frightened witnesses for over 3 decades. The consistent testimony of credible observers, the historical depth of similar encounters, and the cultural resonance of the phenomenon combine to create one of modern America's most compelling cryptid cases. Whether future investigation will produce the definitive evidence that settles the question remains to be seen. Until then, the beast remains at large in the forests and fields of Wisconsin, neither proven nor disproven, a living question mark prowling the boundaries of what we think we know about the world. If you found yourself drawn into the shadows alongside the Beast of Bray Road, if these accounts of witnesses and investigators sparked your curiosity about the mysteries that persist in the forgotten corners of America, then you have discovered what the Baron's Chronicle is all about. This channel is dedicated to exploring the cryptids, folklore, and unexplained phenomena that haunt the American landscape, treating each story with the respect and rigor it deserves. Subscribe now to join our community of mystery seekers, and you will never miss another investigation into the strange and unsettling truths that lie just beyond the reach of common explanation. Hit that notification bell, and together we will continue mapping the borderlands where legend and reality become impossible to separate. The next creature is already waiting for us to find it.